we've had this idea that the masculine traits are equivalent with leadership traits. That's not necessarily always true. How you see your employees is really influenced by more than the way that they act. It's influenced by your expectations, your biases, even your emotions. So perceptual set can also lead to poor team dynamics because a leader can unconsciously favor other team members. As a leader, as a manager, we always are looking for employee engagement. You understand that both the negative impact of perceptual set and the positive outcomes of being self-aware. How you see your employees is really influenced by more than the way that they act. It's influenced by your expectations, your biases, even your emotions. And your experiences, expectations, biases, and emotions can cloud your judgment and impact the way that you lead others and their experience on a daily basis. And essentially what I mean by this is that the way you view the world, your worldview, has a huge impact on how effective you are as a leader and your overall experience. So, and in the cognitive psychology world, this is called perceptual set theory. And as a leader, if you ignore this idea that your experiences and biases can get in the way, then that can result in things like unfair promotion and hiring, unfair recognition, poor team dynamics. There might be team misunderstanding. It can even reinforce negative stereotypes and negative biases. Now, on the other side, so let's say that you buy into the idea that you have biases, you have expectations, and that your emotions can get in the way. If you acknowledge that, if you buy into that idea and you're aware and mindful of it, you can then take actions that will help you hire more consciously, promote fairly, recognize everyone that deserves to be recognized. You can have stronger team dynamics, open communication, and enjoy more diverse teams. And here's the best part, you can make better decisions. So just awareness of this concept, it changes how you lead. Easiest ways to really start to minimize the impact that your biases have is by acknowledging that you have biases. No one is perfect. We don't come out of the womb with no judgments, without filters in our head, in our bodies, in our minds. The way that we are raised, the people that we are around, the cultures that we grow up in, they have an impact. And not all of these are bad. I'm not saying these are bad things, but what I am saying is that whatever has made you into the person you are today creates a filter through which you see things in the world. And so just by acknowledging that, and you can, to really identify where your biases are, just start asking yourself questions. And as you're looking at different individuals or different decisions you need to make, just take time to reflect and to see if your decisions are being influenced by something as simple as your personal experiences. So some of the questions that you can really begin to ask yourself are like this. You could say, am I seeing this person? Am I seeing this situation objectively? So that's a yes or no question. Let me tell you, the answer is probably no. You are not seeing them objectively. Or you can ask yourself, am I relying on my past experiences? Again, probably yes. But just by even bringing those questions up to mind, that's like a trigger for you to look at things differently. I want to share with you an idea. It's not my idea. It's by this gentleman. His name was Edward de Bono. And he had this concept of 6 thinking hats. And it's a decision making and problem solving technique that teaches you and allows you and helps you to explore different perspectives. And you can use something like this, and I'll explain some of it to you. You can use something like the 6-hat thinking technique or problem solving technique to really explore things. And what's going to happen is it's going to remove your biases just automatically by going through the exercise. So here are the 6 hats. And each of the 6 hats represents a different style of thinking. So first, there's the white hat. That's all about facts and information. The red hat is about emotions and feelings. Now, I want to point out that you don't have to push your emotions to the side in this model. It's just treated separately. You can bring in the black hat, and you're going to look at cautions, and that's more about critical thinking. The next hat is the yellow hat. The yellow hat is all about positivity and benefits. So you have a chance to explore positivity and benefits. You then have the green hat, and this is probably maybe one of my favorite hats. It's all about creativity and new ideas. Then we have the blue hat. And the blue hat is what brings it all together because it manages this thinking process. And so just think about putting on different hats and asking yourself questions in each of these categories. And it's going to have an impact on how you view the world, and it's going to minimize the impact of your biases. So now that you understand that your expectations, your biases, and your emotions can have an impact on how you move through the world, how you make decisions and treat others. And now that you understand that both the negative impact of perceptual set and the positive outcomes of being self-aware, we can move into some examples like this. So when we look at how perceptual set really leads to unfair hiring, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're a hiring manager and you're reviewing candidates for, let's say, a leadership role. And you may have this preconceived notion that leaders show up in a certain way. You may think all good leaders are assertive, or they're extroverted, or they're charismatic. And if you bring in a group of candidates, anyone that meets those criteria that you have, you might label them as a good leader. But what happens if someone that's more introverted comes in? A more introverted person may be a little more thoughtful in their communication. They're not going to be as talkative. And despite the qualifications that they have, your perceptual set, the way your expectations, your biases, your emotions may make you think that that person isn't a strong candidate. And that may not be true. You may be missing out on qualifications, on relevant experience, and you may unconsciously favor that person that shows up the way you think they should, that the way they should show up. And so here's the impact on that. You may be missing some amazing, amazing talent. You may, again, overlook those individuals. And if your bias is really impacting your decision making, that's a form of unconscious bias. Well, it's reinforcing your existing stereotypes about leadership. And guess what? Your current beliefs about leadership, it's impacted by what you've seen, how you've been trained, what you've been told have been good. So if perceptual set takes over and you're unconsciously making these decisions based on that, you're going to fall sway to that unconscious bias. Now, what this can end up with, and it's sad when it does, you can end up with a group of leaders that are really homogeneous. And when I say homogeneous, it's it's kind of like they're all pretty much the same if you're just hiring to your unconscious bias. And what happens is you have reduced innovation, that you're not going to have the different voices that you need to really help you take whatever you're working on, whatever your goals are, to that next level. Everyone is going to be thinking the same. And the impact on the culture is just a very narrow culture. So to begin to really avoid this, you can use things like assessments to identify whether or not someone might be a good leader, to really, I want to say, remove that bias. Assessments will help. And then you can follow that with informed interviews that will help you dive deeper into the data. So that's how I see perceptual set leading to unfair hiring, as well as the impact and some ideas for overcoming it. Perceptual set theory can also lead to performance reviews because as humans, we're not perfect. As humans, we tend to get stuck with a certain perception about someone, and it can be hard to let go. So here, I'm going to have you imagine something else. So imagine now that you're a manager and you are conducting a performance review of your team. You might have one employee, let's call this person Alex. They came into the door, they were seen as a rising star when you hired them. And as a rising star, they have the different, I want to say, impression points. They were getting that positive social capital based on what you thought was important. And it could, again, be, maybe it was confidence, it could be assertiveness. And these early positive impressions, it created this view in your mind or in the manager's mind. And the expectation is that Alex would always perform well. And despite maybe some dips in performance, you still have this positive outlook on Alex. Maybe Alex overlooked some rules. Maybe they're not living up to the organization, your company's policies or values. But because you had this positive view of Alex from the beginning, it just continues no matter what they're doing. Now, on the other hand, let's say you have someone named Jaden. Jaden came in maybe a little quieter at the beginning. Maybe Jaden didn't have those impression or success markers initially that you were looking for, but over time, Jaden has been, I want to say, let's not even say improving, but over time, he has been consistent, moving forward, getting things done, but in a quiet way. So even though the results or his results are improving significantly, you may not recognize them, especially if this person isn't someone to toot their own horn. If they're not sharing their successes, you may totally overlook them. And that will be a negative impact based on perceptual set. And so what can happen with this is someone like Jaden, they're performing, but they're quiet. They may get demotivated. They may feel like they're not getting the recognition they deserve. And the way that you score them on a performance review, it may not show all of the positive things that they're really doing. And that can make people feel in your organization or in that team that there's some favoritism going on. And it's not necessarily that you are trying to have a favorite. It's more of perceptual set has gotten in the way. And we need to make sure that we overcome this. And so there's a couple of things that you can do. You can, one, track specific and measurable goals. And so if you have those two individuals side by side, let's say they're doing the same type of job, you can see whether or not they're hitting those goals. Maybe Alex is underperforming Jaden, but because Alex has those markers, you're thinking, Alex is better. And so go to score them from a performance basis. If you have those goals, you're able to be unbiased in that situation. Another thing you can do is really conduct regular ongoing reviews. Don't wait for something like an annual review. Do reviews on a monthly basis and really check in. And check in, and what you're looking for is, again, I want to say, looking at those numbers, looking at, I want to say, the attitude, looking at how well they live the company values or fit the culture. Things like that, provided you're being objective, it will really help you. Unfair recognition is something that can really tear people down. And if we go back to the performance reviews, a performance review, an unfairly scored performance review, is a form of unfair recognition. But that is not where it only shows up. It can show up in who is getting considered for promotion. It can show up in who gets bonuses. And so an employee who frequently engages in the visible tasks, like speaking up in the meetings, may get more recognition than someone that is quieter. I want to share a quick story about someone. Let me see, I have to change this person's name. So let's call this person Donna. Donna was an individual from an assessment standpoint who showed up as a potential tremendous supervisor. She loved supervising people, projects, and tasks. However, when she came into the organization, as someone that was a little, let's say, lower on the totem pole. And being lower on the totem pole, people had certain expectations of her. This Donna did not have the typical, well, let's say she had a high school education. She did not have college education. And looking at everyone else in the organization, when you have an organization where, let's say, 97% of the people have a college education and 3%, someone like Donna, does not, it has an impact on how they are perceived, how their contribution is perceived and recognized. And so there was a situation at a holiday meeting, and they were handing out bonuses to everyone. And it was handed out with a card. Everyone got a card with was a little number written at the bottom of the corner. Here's how much you're going to get. And she accidentally got someone else's. And so another individual raised his hand. He said, "Hey, I didn't get a bonus. What happened?" And when the highest person in the organization went over to this gentleman, she looked at his card and said, "Oh my gosh, you have the wrong card." Found out that Donna had the card and switched the card and told Donna, "Get a bonus. And essentially, you didn't do anything to deserve a bonus." How do you think that made Donna feel? She felt disappointed. She was not recognized. Mind you, this person was busting her behind to move different projects forward. And she got zero recognition when practically everyone else did. And let's say everyone else did do. That was something that truly hurt this person's heart. People could not see her value. And yet, from an assessment standpoint, and the way she worked, even in an outside job, she had to have a second job. This is someone that could lead and lead well. But because of how she came in, the upper management's thoughts on someone who looked like she looked, had the background that she had, it caused her to lose out on being recognized for her contributions. As a result, she did leave the organization. It was unfortunate. So what do we do to avoid something like this? You need to set clear criteria for recognition, and you need to be specific and put it on. Have things that you can check, have a checklist go down. It needs to be measurable criteria, because this person was busting her butt. And I'm not saying this gentleman wasn't. But Donna was busting her butt to get things done, making a positive impact, and yet it wasn't worthy of recognition. So perceptual set can also lead to poor team dynamics because a leader can unconsciously favor other team members. And so this can create an environment where one employee or certain employees get more attention, they might get more feedback and more opportunities than someone else. And you can see this happen when a team member reminds the leader of themselves. That's one way you really can see it. And so this team member that reminds the leader of themselves may get opportunities to be introduced to a special network of people. They may get opportunities to travel. They may get more time with the leader, and makes everyone else look at this individual and say, wow, this leader has a preference. They prefer, let's call this person Sam. They prefer Sam over everyone else. And even though I'm here busting my behind, I'm not getting that special trip. I'm not getting connected to this outside network. And it's another feeling of demotivation, of not being appreciated. The impact is there's exclusion and isolation, and the world feels a little balanced. Then something else that happens is you actually lose diverse perspectives because if individuals don't feel appreciated, they don't feel they have the same opportunities, they feel that there's some favoritism, they just begin to shut down. And when they shut down, you, the leader, loses out on what they could contribute. So something that you can do to really reduce this idea or the impact of perceptual set is it's as simple as rotation. You rotate responsibilities, rotate opportunities, keep a list, keep track. If you're introducing different people, or if you're introducing one person to this vast network, consider rotating the individuals. So if everyone is performing well on your team, then you can make introductions to this network to multiple people. As simple as that. You can also rotate the opportunities as well. So perceptual set can lead to team misunderstanding by something as simple as who's extroverted and introverted. I'm just going to give this as an example. So as a leader, as a manager, we always are looking for employee engagement. But what does employee engagement really look like? Can you define what engagement really looks like and really means? And if you have some individuals that are again showing those visible markers of speaking out, or let's say even being more extroverted, the more extroverted individuals tend to appear more engaged. And introverts may come across as being less engaged because they may not reach out to others as much. So maybe they lack a little warmth, and maybe they need more privacy than most. And if you have in your mind as a leader that engaged employees are speaking up in meetings or they're involved in the company activities, then that may lead you to misunderstand the value of another employee that is perhaps a little bit more reserved. And so this can cause some communication breakdown, again, decreased morale, and unfortunately, lost contribution. How can we begin to really avoid this, avoid perceptual set in this situation? This is where one-on-one check-ins come in. Hold regular, meaningful one-on-one meetings to really understand each employee's contribution. And when you do that and you understand their contribution and their challenges directly, this allows your quieter employees, if you will, to really speak up and be more engaged. You as the leader are going to them to really find out how engaged are they. Something else you can do is ask for feedback in different formats. Some people aren't going to speak out as much in meetings. Some individuals may not like the one-on-ones. Some individuals like email me, text me. You're just going to have to feel your way around that. But don't get caught up in what engagement looks like, because that can lead to team misunderstanding. I will also add, if you're in a one-on-one meeting and someone gives you a great idea, you can socialize that for the more quieter individual. You can socialize it, and let's say they may appreciate that, because you're not taking ideas, you're getting information from them and you're sharing, and that's the way to really highlight their contribution. When it comes to perceptual set reinforcing negative stereotypes, we can always go to the classic masculine traits, feminine traits, and especially in a leadership framework, a leadership mindset, or leadership styles. For the longest time as a society, we've had this idea that the masculine traits are equivalent with leadership traits. That's not necessarily always true. And if you get caught up with this idea that leadership traits show up in one way, you are losing out on the fine nuances, or on the idea that companies go through different cycles. And depending on where you are in a company lifestyle cycle can determine what type of leader that you need. You may not need that aggressive leader if you're in a certain life cycle or company cycle that doesn't require an aggressive leader. Or it could be a particular team that you have, particular department. The style of leadership should match what needs to happen, what needs to get done. If you have, I'm going to use an example of bringing in a CEO. Let's say you have an organization that has a tremendous culture. You don't need to bring in a CEO that's a turnaround specialist, right? You don't need a CEO that has a history of coming in and firing a whole bunch of people, shaking things up, for an organization that is functioning very well, that has a great culture and is still moving up. Now, if the culture is struggling, the organization needs to have a change, and that's when you bring a turnaround specialist in. Same thing with the stereotypes that leaders look a certain way. The example I'm going to give you, it has nothing to do with leadership, but it taught me a lesson. And this was many, many, many decades ago that I learned this lesson, to not judge a book by its cover. I had young children, and my husband and I at the time were dorm parents at a private boarding school. And I remember this young woman, I'm not going to share her name, but I remember this young woman. She had different hair colors. She had a nose piercing. She had all of these let's say, trademarks of a nonconformist, of a person that you may not trust your children with. And this is, like I said, this was years and years ago. And she is the one that taught me this lesson. Out of all of these young women in the dorm, she was the one that I trusted my kids with the most, because regardless of how she appeared and showed up, regardless of the initial biases that I know I did have, she was responsible. If she was going to be late, she would call, I'm running behind. From a schoolwork perspective, she was hitting all of these measurable and trackable outcomes that said, you can trust this person. So I don't care if she had pink hair, red hair, purple hair, rainbow hair. She could have had piercings, every piercing everywhere. She was someone that I could trust. Had I let my biases get in the way and I allowed negative stereotypes to be reinforced, I would not have had the privilege of meeting the best babysitter in the world. So I say it has nothing to do with leadership, and the story doesn't. However, it shows how if you judge a book by its cover with your preconceived notions, with your perceptual set, that you could be losing out on some amazing people. So don't judge a book by its cover. And a way you can do that is using objective leadership assessments. If you're looking for a new leader or you want to promote from within, using objective measures to make sure that your biases are not getting in the way. So as a leader, when it comes to making decisions and making decisions without negative biases, something you have to admit is that most of us believe that one group or a certain age range or a certain amount of experience will be able to give us more meaningful information. All right. Or it could be a certain expert that we see can bring us more meaningful information. So let's say that you're a manager and you hold bias against younger employees. You may think, oh, they're less competent or they're less reliable. They don't have enough experience. Well, this bias can really lead you to dismiss all of their ideas or overlook their contributions. And it's despite proof, evidence of their competence and hard work. And when this happens, you're wasting your talent. You have frustrated and disengaged employees. And what could be more damning, if you will, is you will end up with slower organizational growth, all because you had this idea that younger people don't have enough experience to add value to a project or something that you're working on. And so that can have an impact on how you make decisions. And so what can you do? Focus on competence, all right, not age. There are 12-year-olds graduating college. There are 14-year-olds graduating college that have a tremendous amount of competence and knowledge. And so if we can have that happen, then a younger employee, a brand new employee, it could be their first job, can add amazing value to your organization. So just age is an example. And if we take age on the other side, just because someone is older, let's say they're a senior, you can't say, oh, they're stuck in their ways and they're not going to be able to add value, or this person's dated. Oh my gosh, there's nothing could be further from the truth. So whether they're younger, whether they're older, this is an example of how a bias can get in the way and to negatively impact your decision. An objection that some people may have around perceptual set theory is that it's impossible to remove all bias. So some people might say, it's impossible to remove all bias, so why should we even do it? Well, and guess what? It's true. It is impossible to remove all bias, and you're never going to remove it all. However, that should not get in the way of you attempting to remove some biases. And I want to go back to the 6 hats, the Edward de Bono 6 thinking hats, because that can be a tool that you can use to really help you systematically remove the biases. And so if you make it a part of a practice that you have, then it can be more meaningful, can remove as many biases as possible. So let's go back to the example of an unfair recognition and apply the 6 hats to this. And in the unfair recognition scenario, you are a leader that's thinking, okay, someone that frequently speaks up in meetings, so we're saying someone may be a little more extroverted, gets more recognition than quieter but equally hardworking people or colleague. So let's say that is the scenario. Let's apply all of the hats. So white hat, if you put on the white hat, remember this one's about facts. And so let's take a look at the performance of both employees. It's as simple as that. You look at both employees. Let's say it's an introverted, extroverted employee, and you look and you go, wow, the introvert and extroverted employee are both hitting their goals. They're both smacking them out of the park. One is not better than the others. And so you're looking at their actual contributions to the goals. Now let's take the white hat off. Let's put the red hat on, and let's look at the emotions. So how do you, as a manager, as a leader, feel? So we're bringing our feelings in. How do you feel about the employees who contribute, let's say, a little bit more behind the scenes? How do you feel about these employees? And so you allow your feelings to come in. You write that down, answer it. Next, let's put on the black hat. So take off the red, put on the black. Look at both and ask yourself the question, what's going to happen if I only recognize this outspoken employee? Answer that question. Is it going to create resentment among the quieter team members? Could it reduce overall team engagement? More than likely, yes, but this is forcing you to ask the questions. So let's take off the black hat, and now let's put on the yellow hat. The benefits. What happens if I recognize both employees, not just the visible ones? Guess what? Morale, teamwork, all of that is going to go up. It's going to increase productivity. And now, because you took the time to use the white hat to see that they're both performing well, you are now looking at using the yellow hat to see, okay, I can recognize both of these employees. Let's take off the yellow, put on the green. We now are looking at creativity. How can I reward contributions? Now that I know that I got equally performing individuals, how can I reward both in a meaningful way? That'll be a really great question to answer. And it may be one that you weren't going to answer before because you thought that one was not as engaged as the other. And then finally, with the beautiful blue hat, you can review the entire recognition process, and you're bringing in all of the information from all of the different hats. And you can ask yourself, are all of the contributions valued equally, or is there a bias? So that answers the question as far as the objections that people may have, and then applying the 6 thinking hats to the situation. And I think what I want to end this with is that as a leader, it's super important that you really know yourself. And part of knowing yourself is understanding what your biases are. You can use a tool like the 6 thinking hats to really evaluate the different situations, decisions that you need to make sure that you are getting a more well-rounded perspective. And the better that you know yourself, the better you'll be able to lead.